Here's one for all you Land Rover pervs out there. 7 incredible and historic Land Rovers all lined up for a photo shoot outside Goodwood House. But why are they here? Well, every single one of these cars, even the rather scary looking ones, are going to be sold by Bonhams Cars at their Goodwood Revival sale. And, well, that's not all, because they've said they're going to let us drive some of them. And what better a place to start than this? This is Land Rover chassis 86002. Now, chassis 86002 might not have been the very first Land Rover ever built, but it was the second. Yes, this car rolled off the production line on the 19th of July 1948, exactly the same day as the very first car. And in a quirk of fate, after they'd finished building those cars on that sultry July, in a very British Leyland way, they all took a month off. Didn't build any cars in August, and when they came back, obviously there was something they wanted to test out, because they built some more pre-production cars after this, which makes this car, the second production car ever, older than some of the test cars. After that, it went off and lived a life running around an estate, and then the current owner bought it and he has given it a full restoration. You really can't get much better than this. This is my first experience with driving something like this, and it really has a sense of occasion. You've got to work for it, but boy am I loving it. If you want to buy it, it'll set you back at least £100,000, if not a little bit more. But if you like Land Rovers, then really, what better piece of history could you get? But, that said, what if you wanted something a little bit more regal? Well, how about something like this? So popular had Land Rovers become just 4 years after chassis 86002 was built that these became the car of choice for the then really rather new Queen Elizabeth II. This was the car of choice for her and Philip's trip to see the far-flung parts of the empire, specifically Australia in this case. Of course, they didn't just take a Land Rover, they took some Rolls Royces too, but this is the car that everyone really remembers.
Her Majesty the Queen and Prince Philip, who has a special way for the children, continue their tour of Victoria with a visit to Melbourne Cricket Ground. Amongst the great gathering of about 60,000 are many ex-servicemen and women.
It's not just a standard Land Rover, of course. We couldn't expect Her Madge to just get in and out of any old thing, so the rear has been specially converted for ease of entry and exit, and there's what Bonhams has described as some leaning bars, so that they didn't get too tired. There's also some cosmetic changes. Obviously there's the flag on the front, but the sills have been changed to hide horrible things like the fuel tank and the transmission, which would eventually make their way onto the actual Land Rovers. Oh, and it got the wheels from a Rover P4, which is why, if you have a quick look, the chrome caps still just say Rover on them. If you want this, £120,000 or so, and if you do recognise it, it's because it won its class on the Cartier lawn at the Festival of Speed just over a month or so ago. But speaking of royalty, we better go and get our special guest. But since this is a car fit for royalty, what we really needed was someone a little bit more regal to take part. So we've got our head of social media, the King of Goodwood. He's called James King. What if we were making this video actually in 1948? We'd need something to do our tracking shots in. How about this? In 1948, if you built a car, someone was nearby ready to make it different. Not much has changed really. So when the original Land Rover was built, a company called Tickford in Newport Pagnell were ready and waiting, and they looked at it and thought, I think we can make a family car out of that. And this is what they created. It is the Land Rover Series 1 4x4 station wagon. And it has room for you and everything and everyone you've ever known, I think. When the British government saw this, they looked at it and they went, I don't think that's a farm vehicle. I think that's a car. And so they taxed it. And that was the downfall of Tickford's Land Rover. Because whereas a normal Series 1 80-inch would cost you about £550, this was £961. And in those days, you could buy a terraced house for that. Actually, that's a lie. You could buy 3. So the Tickford ended up not being a particular success. They only ever made 651 of them, and the majority of them ended up overseas. In fact, they were beloved of governments and aid agencies. This one was built and ended up in Poland, was used by UNICEF, and then decades later was bought by the current owner, still in Poland. It has had another lovely restoration, and you know what? I kind of like it. It may have the single worst driving position that any car has ever had. My right foot barely fits onto the throttle because it's so far into the bulkhead, but it's cute and friendly. It looks a little bit like the proto version of the current Land Rover Discovery. It's all sort of skewed to the back rather than tilted forward. Actually, I think Goodwood should have one of these. Wouldn't it look great? And if you want this one, it'll cost you somewhere between £60,000 and £80,000 at the revival sale. The question still remained in 1948, would anyone actually want to buy what was essentially just a military vehicle converted for public use? Well, here is example number 1 of why they did. Because this is chassis number 82269. Yes, that makes it the 2,269th Land Rover ever built. Now you might think that in those early days that probably took several years, and you would be extremely wrong, because this was built in December 1948. Yes, they had built 2,200 plus Land Rovers in just a few months since that first one we were driving earlier. So they were definitely popular, and they've remained popular to this day. People absolutely love them. And after a day spent driving all sorts of different ones, I can see why. We're finally now at home for this car, and suddenly all of its little quirks that feel weird on the road I feel like they've melted away. I can barely even tell you that it's got a terrible turning circle, or that the clutch is really difficult to use because I'm not going to be coming out of first gear very often, and I don't need all that lock straight away. It just feels like exactly what it's meant to be. A car you can point at anything and get over it. And this one, if you want it, and you didn't want to pay the money of that earlier one, you can get at the revival sale for somewhere around £80,000. And if you are one of those people who absolutely adores Land Rovers, like so many people out there, what on earth are you waiting for? Because this is absolutely Land Rover in its essence. It's utterly brilliant and utterly adorable and completely preposterous in some ways. I got cramp earlier from driving this because I am so tucked up inside here, but it has not affected how much I have enjoyed driving it one single bit. Check it out. Go on, have a look at the revival. Get your checkbook out. All right, mate. Yeah.